You are tuned in to 103.5 FM, The Sun Radio. This is my world and welcome to it, and I'm your host, Rex Owens. In this hour program, I invite listeners to learn about the world of the arts and artists. I talk with a variety of artists, including writers, playwrights, musicians, composers, and actors. I don't give my guest interview questions prior to the broadcast to ensure that our conversation is spontaneous and authentic. My guests share their stories about living a creative life. The program is live streamed at www.someprairiemediacenter.com. The lead-in music is by Milwaukee musician, performer, and composer Carrie Sherwood from her CD, Released from the Heart, and the song is called Old Friends. Today I am talking with Labar Laskie about her book, Above the Din, The Diary of an Hep C Wonder Drugs. Good morning, Labar.
Good morning, Rex.
So I understand that this book is a memoir, is that correct?
It is a memoir.
Okay. I'm being an author myself, I'm fascinated by titles, so I have to ask you, what does Above the Din mean?
Well, it is literal and it is a metaphor as well. Literally, it refers to a hobby that I undertook when I had the disease, hepatitis C, and the hobby was flying trapeze. And it literally took me out of the mind space that had me obsessed on my disease, which is quite common for people with chronic diseases. When you're first diagnosed, you tend to think only of that and nothing else. And trapeze really took me out of that space, that headspace that had me fearful and anxiety-ridden because of the hepatitis. And it's a metaphor because I tried many things to keep that mental space above the fear that I felt all the time. And it worked. It worked.
So, of all things a person could do under the sun, how did you choose the flying trapeze?
It's a story.
I want to hear this story.
Okay. When I got diagnosed in 1999, I had a young daughter. She was about 11 years old, and she was involved in circus arts and went to a circus arts school in Evanston, Illinois. And one day she came home with a flyer, and she said, "Mom, there's going to be a big exhibit down at the Museum of Science and Industry, and they're going to put up a flying trapeze. And my teachers at the school are going to be the consultants, and I want to do it."
Okay.
And I looked at the price tag and I said, "Oh boy." I said, "Okay, one time. I'll let you take one lesson."
Sure.
And so I drove my little girl down to the Museum of Science and Industry, and she was scared to death.
Oh.
But I took her, and most of the women, it was an all female class, were in their late teens and 20s. She was the only little kid doing it. But she did it, and I was watching her. They had bleachers set up around the rotunda. This had to be in the rotunda because this thing is 60 feet tall.
Right,
this was a full regulation-size circus flying trapeze. And so I was watching her from the bleachers, and she came running over after the 2-hour lessons. She says, "Mom, you could do it too." And I said, "Oh, no, I can't." And then she had her teacher in tow. She said, "Yeah, $10, we'll put you up there, 2 swings."
Really?
Yeah. And I said, "Well, I've got jeans on. I'm not really, my daughter was wearing a leotard, and, and, but I just said, oh, what the hey, So I tried.
And at this point, you had been diagnosed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I had been diagnosed by about a year or two.
All right.
All
right.
And, I got diagnosed in 99, and this was 2001.
Okay.
And they say about 1 out of 10 or 15 people that tries flying trapeze gets hooked on it.
Okay.
And guess who got hooked on it?
You got hooked on it.
I
that very first day.
Something about it, and I was terrified. You have to climb this tiny little ladder, up to about, I think the platform is 27 feet off the floor.
Okay.
And when you get up there, it seems like a lot more than that.
Right, right.
But as soon as I took off, and you're harnessed in, it's not
Oh, you
dangerous.
are?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah. There's
okay.
safety lines, and there's this huge guy pulling your safety lines. So, it was safe.
Yeah.
But it was like being a kid again.
Huh.
And I was a tree climber,
Right.
and we had neighbors that had a big tree swing that we'd all, we'd kind of launch ourselves off of the back patio and swing
Okay.
out.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it just,
Yeah, we all did that.
Yeah, and it was very reminiscent of that, and just something clicked in my mind that said, "Oh yeah, this is cool."
Interesting.
So I looked into it, and actually the school that was sponsoring this exhibit had a scholarship program, because we didn't really have the cash to do anything much less for both of us.
Right, right.
But we both did it on a scholarship, and she eventually wound up working for them as she got a little bit older.
Wow.
And we both did it for a period of about 10 years until she left for college.
10 years, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you kind of quit after your daughter was not
Yeah,
able to do
and
it with you?
the people that we learned from when the exhibit closed, and the exhibit was only on for a few months, and then they found them an indoor space, and after a period of time, they left. They left town. There
okay.
is since opened a new trapeze school in Chicago, but we weren't a part of that, so we just kind of faded out.
Interesting.
And I got older.
Some might say wiser.
There you go. There you go.
I'm sorry, I just had to say. So let's step back for a minute. Can you explain to our audience what hepatitis C is?
Sure. It's a virus. Hepatitis C is a viral disease, and it's almost a misnomer to call it a liver disease. It's a blood pathogen. You can only get it from blood-to-blood contact. I got it from a blood transfusion. And they say that anyone that had had a blood transfusion before 1992 should be tested, because that's in 1992 they had a test for it, and that you can find out whether you've got it or not.
Okay.
But before that, if you had a transfusion or any sort of blood, some of the cases are unidentified. People don't know where they got it. So it's almost misnomer to call it a liver disease, because it's in the bloodstream. It attacks every part of the body, but the liver seems to succumb first.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's
being
why
the
it's
big
termed
filter.
right.
Right.
That's why it's termed a liver disease.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that time, they didn't have a way of filtering that out when you got a transfusion?
Correct.
Oh.
My transfusion was in 1969
Oh,
at the birth of my first child.
okay.
And it was a life-saving transfusion. I wouldn't have refused it, but
Right.
I had no idea. And they had not identified hepatitis C at that time. They just called it non-A, non-B hepatitis, because they knew it wasn't the A and there wasn't the B.
Right.
A and B is something you get from, in foods.
Right. One's food and one's...
Bad water, bad
Right.
food, that kind of stuff. But C is a blood-borne pathogen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what symptoms did you have that end up leading to the diagnosis of
Actually,
hepatitis C?
none.
Really?
I had none. I had no symptoms from 1969 to 1999. So for
Okay.
30
30
years.
years.
Yeah, which is why they call it, there's books entitled The Silent Epidemic about
Right.
hepatitis C, because it's not uncommon to have absolutely no symptoms. And I would not have been diagnosed except I had a car accident. and I got a concussion.
Mm-hmm.
And the concussion ushered in some terrible headaches that I had to get really strong medication for. And in the process of getting those drugs to treat the headaches, they keep tabs on your liver enzymes whenever you get,
because of the drugs you were taking for the
because of the
okay.
drugs. So
Okay.
the neurologist was checking my blood, my liver enzymes, and he saw the liver enzymes fly sky high.
Okay.
And he had a suspicion that it wasn't just because of the drugs. And he gave me a Hep C test, which I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the one, and it came back positive.
Wow.
So, and actually, by then I had a few, I had fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
but I was 50 years old. I thought, well, what do you expect? You're 50,
Right. Right.
But I did have some liver pain that was starting to make itself known, make its presence known. And so in that respect, I did have some funny little symptoms that didn't have a label yet. And
Right.
after I got diagnosed, it was like, oh, yeah, okay, this is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So trying to continue to follow the timeline, you were diagnosed in 99,
Mm-hmm.
and a cure was found in 2014. Is that correct?
Correct. Actually,
Okay.
in December of 2013, they really, they had the drugs, and they
Okay.
started marketing them and using them in 2014. Yeah.
So because of your case, were you selected like early on for the drug?
I didn't. I was up to go into a clinical trial.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing the third hepatologist that I went to, who was in Northwestern University down at Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in line to take a clinical trial. I didn't want to do the chemotherapy because I wasn't a good fit for the chemotherapy treatment that was
Okay.
in line. So I was waiting for the non-chemotherapy. And these pills came along, and he said, yeah, I can prescribe these for you right now. There was an
Okay.
issue with the clinical trial that I could have gotten in, but they discontinued them.
Oh.
It was a companion drug. The drug that I took, it was called Sovaldi was the name, the brand name. And it was paired with another drug, so you had to take two of them.
Okay.
But these two drugs came from two different drug manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew it was going to be a moneymaker.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they decided at the last minute, oh, we don't want to share the we each want to have our own companion drug.
Sure.
So
Oh.
they stopped the trials and went back to the drawing board to make their own companion drug. But at that time, my doctor was running all the clinical trials. He says, don't worry about it. I can prescribe these off-brand to you. So he gave me the
okay.
two drugs together,
Right.
and that's what I took.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So then from the time that you started taking the drug, when were you diagnosed as being clear of hepatitis C?
I cleared the virus. Well, they knew 2 weeks after I'd started. It's a 3-month therapy.
Okay.
And they knew about 2 or 3 weeks into it that it was working
Oh, wow.
because the viral load level dropped significantly.
Okay.
And once that starts in the right direction, they know you're good.
Right.
They know you're going in the right direction. So you finish the 3-month drug therapy. And then I think I got tested a month later, and a couple months after that, and 6 months after that. And 6 months after it was done, they said, you're cured, you're done,
Okay.
you're good. Yeah.
So there are no maintenance drugs in that you have to take for it?
No, there are no maintenance drugs. I do have to continue to get MRIs and blood work, though,
Okay.
every 6 months.
Every 6 months?
Yeah, because
Wow.
it's left me with a cirrhotic liver because my
Okay.
liver disease, kept churning away until
Right.
the virus was out of my system.
Okay.
And so, yeah, every 6 months they check me because the cirrhosis can occasionally morph into liver cancer.
Oh.
And they want to keep an eye on that.
Sure.
And in fact, I just had an appointment with my hepatologist, and he says, I don't want to scare you because it's a very low percentile that goes into, liver cancer. But he says, I just saw a guy who after he took his drugs, this was like 5 years ago, I never saw him again. And he just showed up on my doorstep with stage 4 liver cancer.
Oh, Lord.
But he didn't do...
But he didn't do the follow-up.
He didn't do the follow-up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So kind of threw the fear of God into me.
Yeah.
You know,
and
like,
rightfully so.
I'll be here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to miss an appointment,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
So then I have to ask, with that happening in 2014, you just published your memoir in 2021, correct?
Correct.
So what took so long to get to the book?
Precipitated?
Yeah.
Well, when I wrote it, the 3 months that I took the drug therapy, I was nervous that it wasn't going to work. I mean, there wasn't a guarantee. It was in the 90 percentile that it was working, but there was a chance it wasn't going to work.
Sure.
So it was a very stressful time for me. And I had kept notes all through my illness since I got diagnosed in 99. So it was like 15 years. I would write down what was going on and what I was doing, because I took a lot of herbal therapies and, you know, the trapeze and all sorts of stuff.
Sure.
Just to keep myself up and going and healthy as I could. And when I took these drugs for 3 months solid, I thought, you know, I'm just going to kind of write it all down. I'm just going to exercise all this anxiety. And I blogged it. I sat down every day and wrote a piece of the story.
Oh, okay.
And that's how it all got done in 3 months.
All right.
And I blogged it. I posted it because I put it on Blogspot, but I also connected it to my Facebook page. So friends and relatives were reading it. Strangers were reading it on blog. It was, I got comments from Russia and Cuba. And yeah, I mean, it was all over. And and it gave me company to walk through this time that was, to me, hopefully the end of it, you know. And after that, so it served its purpose to me. Writing about it, the story, I felt like I'm done.
So the writing turned out to be part of your healing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very therapeutic. And I put it into a drawer. It was done. You know, I was going to walk away. And I did have a friend, though, that she's not on the internet. You'd call her a Luddite, I suppose. She doesn't even give her email out, you know. She only has an email because she has to for, you know, corporate accounts or whatever. Right. And so she read a hard copy of it, and she helped me. Like, was a really good editor. And she said, she loved it. She was always my biggest fan. We've been friends since we were junior high school together.
Sure.
And she died in April 2020.
Oh.
And I just felt like, whoa, maybe I should do something with this book. You know, it kind of gave me a wake-up call, like, because she had said that, you know, you really ought to publish this.
Sure.
And put it out there because it might help some people. And I said, yeah, well, whatever, you know. So, but when she passed, I thought, maybe I should. It was kind of the impetus. That was the beginning.
Right.
That was the beginning of it.
Okay.
And then I had to find an illustrator because the things that I had posted on my blog were not what you see in the book. They were either photographs that I'd taken myself or illustrations or little cartoony things that I'd found on the internet. And when you publish, as you well know, you can't steal from other people on the internet or they'll, you know, write you a citation.
It can happen.
Yeah, and so I went looking for an illustrator. And again, the pandemic gave me my illustrator. I saw her work online. And we communicated. She lives on the East Coast, and she says, yeah, I'm not doing much else this during when we were all locked down.
Sure.
So really the publication of the book was my pandemic project.
Well, see, now that's a perfect segue, because using an illustrator for a memoir is pretty unique. And I was curious on why you decided to use an illustrator.
I guess because I'm just a real visual person.
Okay.
I'm not an illustrator myself. I do paint with pastel.
Mm-hmm.
My husband Tom knows I take pictures incessantly on vacations. I'm just, visuality is a real part of me.
Sure.
And so when I was doing the blog, and of course blogs many of them are illustrated. People pop their photos in, whatever. It just makes it more of a draw, because when you open a web page, it's the pictures that you see first.
Right.
That's what grabs you.
Yeah.
And so the pictures were already a part of the document, being that it was a blog.
Okay.
And so when I transferred it to a book, I just naturally thought, yeah, I want pictures. I never thought of it as a separate thing. They were so integral to the text. I just kind of went with it.
So how did you develop your relationship with the illustrator?
Oh, this is a funny story.
Okay.
When I started taking the medication that cured me of hepatitis C, I mentioned the name of it was Sovaldi. It was manufactured by a company called Gilead. And my hepatologist, being a smart guy, says, I don't know if you guys invest, but this Gilead's going to make a ton of money on this cure, and you ought to, buy some stock.
Okay.
So we did. And at the end of my cure, of my treatment, we had made some money, and we turned around, sold the stock, and invested in a little RV trailer called a Scamp.
Okay.
It's a fiberglass egg. I call it a walk-in closet on wheels. It's about 10 by 10. Oh, yeah. We're not talking Winnebago here.
Right.
We're talking a little egg on wheels.
Right.
But it's got a bed. It's got a sink. It's got a stove. It's got a bathroom. And so we bought it in 2014 and in the fall, and we've taken trips on it. And on Facebook, I joined a group called Scampers. It's a Facebook page for group for scampers.
Okay.
All right. So fast forward to 2020. In the pandemic, if you'll remember, in March or so, everyone was called back to return from overseas if they were traveling. All right. Well, one of my fellow scampers, a woman named Lona Powell, who I did not know, but was in my Facebook Scamp group, she returned from a trip to Europe. And she had been there with either her sister or a friend, I'm not sure, but her husband had not gone. And she came home from this European trip fearful that she would bring COVID home with her.
Oh, sure.
And so she isolated in her Scamp. She pushed it up to her house, ran the electric wire out the window, plugged it into the hose,
Right.
and she spent 2 weeks in her Scamp. And she wrote, and she's a journalist. She journals a lot. And it's always pictorial because she's an illustrator. She's really a gifted artist. And she started journaling this isolation journal in her Scamp. And every day she would post, at 8.5 by a notebook page that said what she was doing, how she was getting along, and little pictures with it, and she would post it on the group Scamp page on Facebook. And everybody was going wild. I mean, it was just, it spoke to us. It was simple. Her tagline at the end of each day was, oh my God, I'm going to space it out. I'm thankful for everything. I have no complaints whatsoever. It was just a wonderful, and all her pages were uplifting and down to earth. I mean, she was gardening, she was walking through the woods. It was very therapeutic. What we needed at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was really fearful and anxious and blah blah blah.
Right.
She was just a beacon of light.
Yeah.
And so that was happening. I lost my best friend, the one that said I should publish.
In April, right.
And I saw Lona Powell's work on the internet, and I shot her a note via the internet, and I said, would you possibly be interested in a project? And I sent her a few chapters of my book, and or a few blog posts, actually. And I didn't hear back for a few days. And then after, I think, a week, she said, I wasn't going to do it, but my granddaughter talked me into it. She says, Grandma, what the hell else are you going to do? We're all locked in. We can't go anywhere. You're retired.
Right.
Why not? And so she said, okay, let's do it.
Sure.
And that's how it started. And that's how I found Lona Powell.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and then is the cover design, let me try to explain to the audience. The cover design is a drawing of a woman on a trapeze with a lifeline attached to her. That's
Lona's work.
That's Lona's work too.
Right. Yep. She did the cover.
It's a great cover. And covers do sell books. So
thank you.
I'm expecting that will sell that book. So let's talk a little bit about your process of going from a series of blogs to a full-blown book. How did you do that? And there's a huge difference.
Yeah,
between,
there is.
Unrelated or linked blogs versus a book.
And the fact that I wrote the blog so quickly, every day for 3 months, some of it was chronologically obvious to me, the way it should go. And when I finished and then went back with the idea of making a book of it, I kind of did shuffle some things around that I didn't think were synchronistically in order. And of course I edited, I rewrote certain things that didn't make sense or weren't clear enough. And there's also a tricky bit in there about, I have 2 timelines going. I chose to have a small blurb at the end. Each chapter there's 84 chapters because it was an 84-day protocol. So there are 84 chapters. And each chapter, at the end of the chapter, and they're short, there is a daily check-in. What's happening today? May 14th, May 15th, May 16th, May 17th, during the course of the treatment. Because I was living my life as I was writing the blog. And so there is that timeline. But then the chapters themselves go back to 1999, go back even to when I contracted the disease in 1969. So I have these 2 timelines going on. And that was tricky to keep track of because I didn't want to mention anything in my dailies that were going to spoil the suspense for the other part of it. I had almost 2 complete stories going on. And so anyway, that was tricky to work through. And I had to make sure that my numbers were correct. I had to go back because there's a lot of information about hepatitis C that needed to be verified. And I've got like 30 pages of index in the back. Because everything had to be notated. My sources had to be notated. And thank goodness for grandchildren. Because I have my oldest grandson is, he's a doctorate student now. And I was complaining to him one day on the phone. I said, I don't know how I'm going to reference all this stuff. I mean, I never did.
That's a formal academic paper.
Research papers at school gave me the heebie-jeebies. I just, that wasn't my thing.
Sure.
And he said, well, I'll do it. And I said, excuse me? You're writing a dissertation. How can you
Right.
help? He says, there are programs.
Oh.
And he taught me, he said, yeah, you get programs and they seek out the source material. All you
Really?
Oh, yeah. They
Huh.
seek out the source material and then they download all the statistics about the source material.
Wow.
The year, the author, the publication, the page number, he says, this is how we do it now, Grandma.
Boy. Things have changed since I was in
A
graduate
lot.
school. Yeah.
A lot. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was very helpful
I guess.
doing that.
So what
Yeah.
about the editing part of the book? So you get the thing completed. Who helped you with the editing?
I did have readers, friends.
You did, okay.
That were readers, and they didn't do the physical, but they would give me feedback,
Okay.
and then I would edit based on their feedback. But I
Sure.
did have, years ago, I worked for a company, a corporate industrial company, and I was in charge of a newsletter and a magazine and a lot of internal communications, and I did their graphic arts as well. So I was able to lay out my whole book myself because
Okay.
I had that
Had that background.
skill set. Yeah. But I had worked with a woman who was editor of these pieces that we did for this corporation, and I was still in contact with her. And I contacted her and said, would you be interested in taking on an editing job? Because I respected her advice, whatever feedback she would give me, and she did it.
Wow.
She went through the whole thing with a red pen and was very efficient and very helpful
Excellent.
at the
excellent.
editing. So that was she was my editor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, your book includes a disclaimer. Why did you feel the need to have a disclaimer in your book? I mean, it's your memoirs. So.
Right. But in the book, I say what I did to heal myself. And not even heal myself, but keep myself afloat until the healing came.
Right.
And it worked for me. But I wouldn't presume to suggest that anyone do what I did.
Okay.
Sometimes I went against the doctor's orders. If they thought, at one point I did 3 years in a row. I did the Avon walk for breast cancer. My mother passed from breast cancer, and so in the year 2001, 2, and 3, I believe, I walked 60 miles from Kenosha to Chicago
Oh, my.
over the space of 3 days.
Okay.
It was called the Avon 3-day walk for breast cancer. Well, I told my doctor at the time what I was doing. She says, "Oh, no, you're not." What are you, crazy?
Right, right.
And we had to sit down together and say, okay, how could I safely do it? And I had to promise that if I really thought I was at the end of my tether, I would stop because I was not that strong at that
Right.
time. This was before the trapeze and all that stuff. I mean, I was so fatigued and so physically kind of down. I just wanted to get going.
Sure.
And this gave me a goal to get going. It
Okay.
kicked me out of the house every morning. I'd walk a couple miles, and I don't think before I did that first Avon walk, I'd walked more than maybe 3 or 4 miles at a time, and it was
Sure.
a long walk. So she kind of, but I said, look, I'm gonna do it. I know you don't want me to do it, but I'm gonna do it. So tell
Right.
me how I can do it safely, and we worked through it together. But that's an instance where I think if I'd listened to the doctor, I wouldn't have done it. So I wouldn't expect anybody to, and even my hepatologist wrote the foreword to the book.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said, get your doctors. He was a strong proponent of check with your doctor first.
Honestly, yeah, that makes
And I
sense.
didn't tell him everything I did. I'd tell him after the fact,
After the fact.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to see you coming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I have to ask honestly, did you suffer depression during therapy?
I had definitely low points. I think I suffered from depression anyway. My mother was prone to depression. She was actually hospitalized from depression.
Okay.
So it's something that I've always had to deal with. Actually, that's one of the major reasons I didn't do the early treatments, the chemotherapy. It's a combination of interferon and ribavirin, and it was a 1-year protocol. And people that did it suffered greatly from depression.
Oh.
And in fact, as a matter of course, when they start the treatment, and this is years ago, they would routinely put their patients on antidepressants.
Oh, okay.
To
counter them.
To counteract the effects of the drugs. So that the physical exercise that I did, the trapeze and everything, that helped to keep the depression at bay. I think that's a big reason why I did it.
That makes sense. Well, and I know that you tried a number of alternative methods.
I did.
And I'm curious why you chose alternative medicine versus standard medicine.
Well, for the reasons I just gave.
Okay.
I think the depression was the biggest one. And if you can imagine, they were asking patients to self-inject interferon 3 times a week on your own for a year. And the symptoms that came along with that were like to the flu.
Oh.
If you can imagine having the flu for a year. I mean, people would drop out of work. They couldn't work.
Sure.
And I had a young child at home. We needed my income. There was numerous reasons why I just didn't want. And the cure rate was very low. When I first was diagnosed, the cure rate was less than 20%.
Oh my.
Yeah. And if you took the cure, or the cure, I put that in quotes, if you took the regimen of chemotherapy and it did not work, which the majority of people it did not work for, the virus would then multiply exponentially in your system after the chemo stopped. So your liver disease would progress at a faster rate. More people went into liver cancer and died.
Wow.
So that was a big, I thought, I don't need to take that chance.
Right. Right.
I'm just going to hang on at least as long as I'm healthy enough to keep my head above water.
Sure.
I was going to wait for a better way.
Yeah. So how is hepatitis C treated today? Does it vary much?
It's still a 3-month course of pills. There's a variety of medications out now, though, and I don't know the name of them, the names of the different medications. But I have friends that have taken different medications from what I took, and it's a fairly successful, upper 90 percentile cure rate.
High.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. It's like you take these, you're done.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So how would you say overall having hepatitis C affected your life?
Monumentally.
Okay.
Yeah. Because for 15 years, my life pretty much revolved around it. The things that I did, like the flying trapeze, etc. Above the din. That's what it's all about.
Right.
Keeping your life and not identifying as your disease. And
is that easy to do? End up identifying with the disease?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think people with chronic illness fall into that pit of, kind of despair. Like I am life is over.
Sure.
They talk about, and I've listened to some podcasts on chronic illness, people that suffer with many different chronic illness, and there is a sense that you grieve the loss of the life that you had, because certainly psychologically, and depending on how bad your symptoms are, how much those symptoms disturb your everyday life. makes a huge difference of how you treat it mentally and how much of your mental space is taken up with the disease.
Sure.
And certainly if somebody says, oh, you could die from this, well, that takes it to a whole new level.
Right.
You know, desperation is not too strong a word to describe what you'll do to avoid that outcome.
Right.
You know?
Of course.
Yeah.
So what do you hope that your readers get from the book?
Actually, different things. One thing is I think there's a lack of information still about hepatitis C.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because I was immersed in it, and that's my way. When I get an illness or I'm a researcher by nature, I want to know more.
Sure.
So I really plugged in and learned as much as I could about it. There's a lot of people out there that have it or that know somebody that has it that don't know anything about it. So I tried to make the book as informative as I could about the disease and the symptoms of the disease and what you can do for the disease. And so I think it fills a niche there. And I have read many other books about hepatitis C, memoirs or informational books, and they were kind of dry. You know?
Right.
And I tried to make my book not dry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, make it there are little textbooky chapters where you get facts and figures and stuff.
Sure.
But I tried to make it appealing and readable so that it's like a spoonful of sugar making the medicine go down, you know.
Right.
And the pictures are part of that too.
Sure.
I wanted to be able to draw in a broad audience that might otherwise might not pick up a book about hepatitis C, but they should pick up a book about hepatitis C because it's a real threat to a lot of people. And I think that as I've joined Facebook groups about hepatitis C, I'm still amazed at the questions that people ask.
Really?
For
example?
What is it? I just got diagnosed. What the hell is this? You know?
Okay.
And there was a lot of media attention in 2014 when these wonder drugs came out.
Mm-hmm.
Newspaper articles, you'd see advertisements on TV. I mean, there was a lot of publicity because it was such a great innovation.
Right.
And I assumed that, I paid a lot of attention to that stuff.
Sure.
And I just assumed that everybody else did too. But of course they didn't.
Right.
Or they didn't know they needed to at the time, and now they do. So here we are in 2021, and it's like anything else. If you don't think it applies to you, just kind of like, you're not paying attention.
That's human nature.
Yeah, it's human nature.
Yeah.
And so there's still it's still happening. People are still getting it, and so I think that this book might serve that group of people to inform them, at the same time entertain them, and
Right.
all that.
So
Yeah.
share with us how you found a publisher for your book.
I found a publisher through a mutual friend, a friend here in Madison, actually, who had self-published several books. I sent the manuscript to a few traditional publishers, never heard a word.
Yeah.
And I figured, I was talking to other people, other authors, I find that that's not unusual.
That's not unusual at all.
Yeah,
No.
not unusual at all.
No.
And if you don't have it's who you know, always. And so and this was kind of serendipitous too. When I was ready to publish, I mentioned it to a friend here in Madison, and she said, well, we've published a few books with this woman in Milwaukee. And I liked it that she was local. This was Henschel House, excuse me.
Right.
Henschel House. And so she responded. I sent her an email, and she responded right away. It's like, okay, this is it.
Right.
And that was, and I took the word of a friend who I
Sure.
trusted and knew that this was, a bona fide good publisher, and she would walk me through the process and blah, blah, blah.
Sure. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So how are you marketing your book?
I'm being on your show, Rex.
Okay. That's a great start, Labar.
I've got a Facebook page that I'm putting ads out on and connecting with other Hep C pages. And I'm also reaching out to podcasts that specialize in chronic illness and are interested in hearing other people's stories. And that's about it. And I'm also entering the book in book award contests.
Oh, which one?
Oh gosh, how could I? You've caught me
okay.
at a blank.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, no. There's about 5 of them so far, but I've got a list, as long as your arm,
Right.
that have yet to be put in. Yeah.
Right. Well, I know that you're working with a publicist.
Mm-hmm.
How did you select your publicist?
I got her name from my Henschel House
Okay.
publisher.
Okay.
Yeah, she gave me several names, and I went with someone who was close by, who was highly recommended, and she's a dynamo. Just a dynamo.
So what kind of services do you get from the publicist?
She has helped me set up the author Facebook page and put ads on that. She also gave me a list of the book award contests that I needed to enter. And she came up with the podcast list that's been very helpful. I'm doing a lot of the legwork myself, but she knows where to go to find what. And then feeds me that information, and I can act on it.
Sure.
Otherwise, I wouldn't know where to begin. She even knew I put a little note card inside every book that I sell, or at least the ones that come from Henschel House or come from me directly. And it's how to post a review, because a lot of people that originally I sold to, my friends and relatives, and they tend to be of my age group, which is, and I like them to post a review on Goodreads or Amazon, and they say, well, I don't know how to do that. So my publicist said, well, this is how you do it, and walked through the steps.
Right.
And well, that's not that hard, but you have to know how to do it,
Yeah, you do.
And so she helped me construct this little note, and now I can stick that note into each book and say, because reviews are important. It kind of gives other readers a hint as to whether or not they should
It's that word of
spend
mouth
their
again.
time and money. Yeah, right.
So have you gotten many reviews?
I've got about 25 or so
Okay.
out there, maybe 10 or 15 on Amazon, and about that many on Goodreads.
Right.
So far, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, I'm real happy with
So
that.
have you noticed an impact on your sales for the reviews? Or maybe it's too hard to draw a direct line.
Yeah, it's too
don't
hard
know.
it's too soon to draw. The book came out at the end of May.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I haven't, not enough time has passed to really see, how it's going.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, what formats is the book available in?
It's available in paperback
Okay.
and Kindle.
Okay.
And I believe it's under Kindle Unlimited for free.
Right.
And you told me that lasts only 90 days.
It only lasts 90 days.
Yeah.
Then you have to renew it.
Right.
I don't understand that. I can't explain it. It's a fact of life, is what.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're learning all those little tricks.
Right.
And it's available directly from me or directly from the book's own website, AboveTheDinBook.com, and from Henschel House Books. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Are you gonna try to pursue any, library presentations or things like that?
I am. The pandemic is still putting kind of a kibosh on things.
Right.
People are kind of hesitant to go out, and actually the 2 libraries that are closest to me are under construction right
Oh, really?
now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, both in Lake Geneva and Wilmette. We also live in Wilmette, so
All right.
in Illinois.
Sure.
Everybody's.
So did COVID-19 end up influencing the timing of publishing the book at all?
Not really.
Not really? Okay.
Because so much of it was done remotely. Lona Powell and I, my illustrator, we connected simply over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
My publisher, we did everything on Zoom. Zoom was really going.
It was.
It made a big difference
Okay.
and was facilitated a lot of things that used to require in-person meetings, but it seems to be that's the way to go right now.
Sure.
Yeah. So
So-
no, I had the book launch. This is what got affected by COVID. I wanted to do a book launch party, but I wanted to do it safely.
Right.
And this is the end of May. Most people were vaccinated, but not everybody was vaccinated by then. So we wound up hiring a boat on Lake
Really?
Geneva. Yeah, we went out. We hired the Lady of the Lake
Oh my.
and had it outside on a boat
Uh-huh.
and treated everybody to an afternoon on the lake.
That sounds like a great book
It
launch
was
to
a
me.
great book launch. It was so much fun.
So how many people did you have for your book launch?
We had about 80 people.
80 people?
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. Unfortunately, Miss Henschel could not make it because she was not well. She was my big miss for the book launch. So we met
Yeah.
later. But
Interesting.
yeah.
Huh. So would you say that your experience with having hepatitis C influenced any way your response to COVID-19?
It did. Definitely.
Okay.
I often think that people that haven't dealt with a serious illness, whether it's chronic, terminal, not terminal, but something that really impacts their life and upsets their daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
If people haven't experienced something like that, the initial reaction, which is natural, is, I think, anger.
Mm-hmm.
It can be anxiety, but anger is the overall, response. Like, how dare you?
Right, right.
I have this life. What do you mean I can't blah, blah, fill in the blank.
Right.
Do this, go there, whatever. And when the pandemic hit, something clicked in my brain and said, okay, I know this.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me I can't do this, I can't go there, I have to behave in a certain way. And it was like, okay, I know this. I know this territory.
So did you hunker down right away?
Yep.
You did?
Yep.
Okay.
Again, because I know the damage that a virus can wreak, whether you're aware of it or not. So, in fact, somebody in my family passed away because another member of the family who was going in and out of the house was asymptomatically COVID positive and brought it home to this elderly person, and they contracted it and died.
Oh, Lord.
So what you don't know can really hurt you.
Yeah.
What you don't think it's viruses I respect. And bacteria and those kinds of things. And when the microbiologist says you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds, by God, I'm going to wash my hands for 20 seconds, you know?
I hear you.
I believe them.
Right.
Because, science is real.
So then I take it you're fully vaccinated.
Yep.
Okay.
Can't wait for the booster.
Can't wait for the booster. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. Do you think there might be another book come out of that experience?
Out of COVID?
Yeah.
I haven't thought of that.
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a direct correlation
Yeah.
between what you went through with hepatitis C
Interesting.
and your response to COVID-19.
Right.
And when I think of, all of our friends and how we responded, I mean, our response was just like yours. We didn't just leave the house.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do
Right.
at that point?
Right.
And I had some training because I used to work for a healthcare agency in pandemic response.
Oh, interesting.
And my first reaction was, oh yeah, this will pass.
Oh.
I was telling my wife, by July we'll be fine.
Wow.
Of course, completely wrong. And so, yeah, I think our backgrounds help influence how
Sure.
we respond to things. So think about that. You might have another book there.
When the pandemic started, I bought the John Barry book, the great influenza.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Because I wanted to know, okay, what's the landscape going to look like really?
Right.
And after reading that, and it's a carbon copy of what's going on today.
It
or
is.
actually, we're a carbon copy of that.
Right.
It gave me a heads up. And where you said, oh, it'll be over by July, I knew that we were in for it for a few years.
Right.
It's like, oh, this isn't going away.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
now, as I understand their science, they're actually saying it'll be with us forever.
Yeah, right. And we're just going to have to learn to deal with it
Right.
and be safe.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
For sure.
Interesting.
yeah.
So, what advice would you give to listeners out there who have a major life experience like you did and would like to write about it? What advice would you give to them?
Well, don't start it unless you're really serious. Because it's a lot
It's
of
a lot
work.
of work.
I mean, like I said, in college, I wasn't the one that loved to do research papers.
Right,
and this is
right.
like the granddaddy of research papers.
That it is.
Yeah, do it if you love it, if you love the process of writing, which I do, and if it serves that purpose for you to make you a happier person because you're doing it for that, and if you really think that you have something to say that you want to communicate to people, doing it on a whim, I wouldn't advise because it's tough. It's tough, but it's very rewarding. I'm very happy that I did it.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay. Well, as I expected, we've had a very fascinating conversation this morning. Tell our audience again where they can find your book.
They can find it at Amazon. It is on Amazon Kindle or Henschel House Publications, or at AboveTheDinBook.com.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for coming in this morning.
Thank you for having me, Rex. This was a pleasure.
The closing music is by musician, performer, and composer Carrie Sherwood from her CD, Released from the Heart, and the song is called Connected. The library is open, folks, and it's open Monday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., on Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., on Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and Sunday afternoons from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Most of the programs remain virtual. You can check the library calendar at www.sunprairielibrary.org. The Sun Radio is underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie. My next guest will be local author and Media Center radio host Pete Zins. Until next time, this is Rex Owens wishing you a creative life.